I've taught a lot of people how to use Contour, so I decided to make a quick intro video of how do you get up and running if you've never used it before. The target audience for this video is someone who is familiar with Excel. You don't need to be an Excel wizard, but some familiarity is helpful. If you do have experience with BI tools or data visualization tools or analytics tools, feel free to watch this at 2x speed. You'll get a tour of the UI, you'll figure out how to use it, and I think the rest will come naturally. With that, let's dive in. The first question is, how do you access Contour? If you have it pinned to your sidebar like I do, you just click on the icon and you're good to go. If you don't see it there, you can go to the applications portal and search for Contour or any other app that you might need. It's usually up here front and center, but if not, you can just type in the search bar and you'll find it that way. Before we dive in, I want to address one other question that I usually get, which is when do you use Quiver and when do you use Contour? They're both analytical apps in Foundry, and it can be a little confusing when to use one versus the other. Simple rule of thumb is if you're doing analysis on objects in your ontology or time series, then Quiver is your tool. If you're doing analysis on data sets, then you want to go with Contour. That's the dividing line. The question of like, when do you use a data set versus something in your ontology is probably beyond the scope of this video. I would say bias toward using something in your ontology if you can. But like there's a lot of reasons why you can't do that, or maybe you have some analytical data set that isn't synced to your ontology because it's for different purposes. Well, then you want to use Contour. All right, we're going to start a new Contour analysis. And the first thing that pops up is this file browser modal. It's showing me recent analyses I've done. And if I click on the favorites tab, it can show me analyses that I favorited because I want to come back to them later. This is where I want to emphasize Contour may be a little different than other analytical tools you've used in the past in the sense that everything in Contour is saved. You're either accessing an existing analysis or you're going to save a new file. There's no one-off ephemeral queries. If you do need to do just a quick query that you don't anticipate on saving, just use the default title, which is like new analysis and then a timestamp, and you can save it in your personal folder. We're going to click new analysis. And we're not going to save it in our personal folder. We're going to save it in the Contour 101 project. I'm not going to give it a name yet because we're actually going to come back and do something a little different in a few moments. So for now, I'll just click save using the default name. And now we're brought here. This is the step where a lot of people get confused because it's not obvious what you do. You have this message, create a path, and a button below it. What is a path? It's not exactly obvious. That's fine. We'll get to it. Come with me for a moment on a journey of creating a path, and I'll explain what a path is in a little bit. When you click the Create a Path button, you get this modal that at the top says Select a Dataset. All Contour analyses start with a dataset. If you don't know what dataset you're after, you can use this search bar to do a search, but it's usually best, it's usually easiest at least, if you do have an idea of what the data is that you're after. I happen to know. So I'm going to click on all. I'm going to go to object data sources, which are data sets backing objects in the ontology. And I'm going to start with transactions. So when I click on transactions clean, I can see some metadata about it. I can take a look at what columns it has, double check that this is the data I actually want. If I want, I can even preview it in this little table. So I'm going to click select, and that's going to bring us into this path. So Contour just took us from the overview UI to the path UI. And as you can see, I have a tab up here that says transactions clean. I can add a new path. The best way to think about paths is like worksheets in Excel or another spreadsheeting software. It's just ways of organizing chunks of your analysis. The real interesting part of a path is the structure it gives you. Paths are made up of boards. What we're looking at here is the first board, and all it is a reference to this data set. I have some metadata, like I've got the table size, it's 201,000 rows, I've got the file path, where it's at, its name, so on and so forth. If I click on this link, I'm brought to that data set. So we're leaving the analysis and then going to the dataset preview app. And here, I've got a preview of the data. I've got all the metadata, its history, its details, all the usual stuff you would see for any other data set. I wanted to bring us here because there's another, probably even more common way of starting analysis, which is when you're at a data set. And again, think of the workflow. I'm going to search for a data set. You're going to go there. You're going to make sure it's what you're actually after. You can click this Analyze Data button up here and then Analyze in Contour. In my experience, that's been the most common way of getting into Contour anyway. So, like I said before, Contour analyses get saved as files. It has stuck us as a new analysis in the grocery project, which is where that data set is stored. I'm going to save as, again, back in the Contour 101 project. And now I'm going to name it. We're going to do a store performance analysis. Great. So now we can see in the header, we're in the Contour 101 project in the store performance analysis. Now we can get into the meat and potatoes of how you actually do things in Contour. Now we're in a path. It's called transactions clean. It gets that name from the data set that it starts with. Let's begin by giving it a better name. For this whole analysis, I'm going to do some looking at how different grocery stores are performing in terms of by department sales, maybe different products across different states. And then we'll create a dashboard for showing all that data to someone else. So for this path, I am going to... Let's see, let's get some charts showing sales for different grocery stores in different states. So maybe we'll do performance by state. We'll call it performance by state. Okay, and then what do we do next? Well, Contour helpfully says start your analysis, but it doesn't really say what to do in order to start your analysis. You have these menus here at the bottom. Each menu, has a different theme. One is tools that let you visualize data. One is tools that let you filter the data. These tools are called boards. And you construct a path by adding one board after another. Boards are instructions that you give Contour. And you can either tell it to display data or to transform data. That's all boards do. Just their instructions to display or transform data. So let's begin by adding one that displays data. We'll go to Visualize, scroll down here to Table, and we'll just get a table of the data. This is maybe the simplest board that you can add, and it just lets you get a visualization of what the data looks like. This is more useful after you've done some transformations before this, but for now, I think it illustrates the point of visualizing the data. One thing that I'm noticing just scrolling through here, some of the totals are null. That doesn't seem very good. So let's add a board that transforms the data by filtering out rows that have null totals. I'm going to go to Filter, click on the filter board. And okay, there's a couple things going on here. First, I'm going to keep all the rows that match all of these filters. So what do you mean all the filters? Well, you can add a bunch of different filters, and you can say, keep the rows that match one of these four filters, or keep the rows that match all of these four filters. We don't need four filters, we just need one, so I'm going to delete some. You could also reverse this and say, here are the rows that I want to remove. Okay, and I want to say where total, it's not equal to, but instead you could do things based on text, based on dates, based on numbers, like, is equal to this, or is less than that. What I want is not null. I'm going to click Save, and then I'm going to add another table to see what it looks like. And okay, quickly scrolling through here tells me that there are, no null totals, which is good. I can also tell that the filter reduced the whole data set from 201,000 rows up here to 197,000 rows. And there we go. We've done the very first, very basic bit of analysis in Contour. Now let's go back a bit and show how you can do this in a slightly more streamlined way. And to do that, I'm going to X out, delete this table, and delete this table. And so that's one thing to take note of. You can delete boards at any part in the path, and once you do that, the rest of the path will recalculate. Okay, so what can we do instead? We can click this button that says Show Data, And what that does is it pops a table out from the right of my screen. Now yours might come up from the bottom. I prefer mine to come out from the right, and to change that, you just click on these three dots here and select dock to right or dock to bottom, depending on your preference. So as you notice, I have the very first board selected. There's a blue border around it. If I select the second board, the filter, this table on the right will update. And I prefer this way of looking at the data. If you want a permanent view of a table at a given point in your path, then feel free to add the table board. I think this is a little more convenient for quickly checking whether your data is in the shape that you think it is. Okay, so let's just make this table a little bigger and see what we got here. We've got total, we've got the tax of the transaction, and as you might have surmised, each row is a single transaction, a single checkout in the grocery store. We've got the date it happened. We have the store ID, the store name. We've got whether the customer is a member. But if we want to graph something by state, you know, how many stores are in a state or what's the total transaction volume by state, we don't have that information here. So I'm going to close the table, and then we're going to add a join board to join in data from another data set that has that information. A join board is an instruction to transform the data. We're transforming it by adding new columns from another data set. In Contour, it's called add columns or switch to data set or intersection. But if you're familiar with joins, then the real names are right here underneath: left join, right join, inner join, etc. And so we're going to choose the data set that we want. Again, I know it's a data set that's backing an object type in the ontology. I'm going to go to object data sources, and what we want is store. Select that. And what we've got here now is we have all the columns we already have on the left here, and we haven't selected any columns to add in. I'm going to click on add columns, and then let's see, which ones do I want? We already have store ID. Don't need that. Don't need store name. We already have that too. I don't think I need store street for this, but store region, which is state in this case, that seems good, and store city, also good. These are only in the US, so we don't need country. And I think that's it. The next step is to say what criteria to match these rows on. And so I'm going to say that store ID on the left should equal store ID on the right. And you can add more conditions if you need to. I'm going to click save. And good practice after you add a join is to quickly calculate the summary. You want to make sure that the total number of rows hasn't deviated too far from what you expect. So in this case, I'm not expecting any change in the number of rows because for each transaction, there should be exactly one store matching to it. And indeed, that's what we see after I clicked calculate summary. If we want to add a summary that is visible without having to click that button, we can add a summary board. And sometimes if you don't want to go through the menu here, or you don't even know if a board exists, you can click find a board, and you have a little search bar here. So I'm going to type in summary, click on summary, and it will add a summary board. And this will automatically recalculate whenever the whole path recalculates. Let's start adding some charts. I think it'd be good to see over time how many sales were there for a given state. We'll get to the state filtering in a sec. For now, let's just add the chart. So I'm going to go to visualize, click on chart. And on the right-hand side here, we have the configuration panel. On the x-axis, I want the transaction timestamp. I don't want the exact time. Let's group it by month. And the y-axis, I want the sum of the total. So how much people purchased overall. Let's compute that. Okay, great. We have the sum in dollars of how much people purchase across all the stores by month. Let's start making this chart a little better. On the y-axis, I think we can rename that to total spent. On the x-axis, we can just call that month. And then I'm going to switch from the data tab to the format tab here. I don't think we need the legend here. And for number formatting, it'd be good to add the $sign. So our y-axis is formatted in a nicer way. That looks pretty good. I think maybe we should segment this by chain, because in our data set, there are multiple different chains of grocery stores under this one parent company. So I'm going to segment by store name, which is functioning as a chain name in this data set. And Contour says, current visualization reflects an old configuration. Click compute and save to update. It's just letting me know that, what you're looking at is not up to date relative to the configurations you've set. So I'm going to click compute and save. And now we have different colors. I think I want to add the legend back in now so that we know which color corresponds to which store. I'm going to rename that to chain. And so, okay, looks like Fresh Harvest Market has the most sales overall, with Greenfield Grocery being close second. This looks pretty good. I think I'd like to add a chart that is just like this, but for total number of transactions, not total dollar values. And I could do that by, let's close that. I could do that by going down here, clicking on the chart again, and reconfiguring all those little options that I just configured. Or I could click on this menu here, More Actions, and copy this. And then when I go down here underneath the board, but above the menu, I have three options: edit path, insert board, or paste chart board. I want to paste this chart board. And all this does is it saves me some time by pasting another copy of the board I just made. And what I need to change here is x-axis is good, but instead of the sum of the total spent, I just want a row count, because each row is one transaction. A row count will let me know how many purchases there were for each month. Again, compute and save, and we're updating our chart. Looks pretty good to me, except the y-axis. I want to take that $ off the y-axis. Great. Okay, so now we've got these two pretty good looking charts. You can change the colors if you want to. I'm not going to here. Let's give these boards names. Most of these boards don't have a name. You don't necessarily need to name them. But you can if you want to, especially if it's something that's really intentional. It might help your future self if you have a description of what's going on. So I'm going to call this one total spent over time. And I'm going to call this one purchases over time. Also, I don't love how some of these have labels, but some don't. These don't, because the 1478 is too wide for that bar. I'm just going to go to Format, and then at the very bottom, turn labels off. Okay, that looks better to me. Now I'd like to add a filter so that we can specify which states we actually want to see these charts for. Right now, we're seeing them for all states. And in doing this, I will be able to show another way that you can add boards, which is right in the middle of the path. So underneath each board, you have that same set of options. Since I still have that one chart on the clipboard, I could paste it here. I don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is insert a filter so that we can pick the states that we care about. So again, I'm going to keep all rows that match all filters, and what I'm going to filter on is store region, which is again the store state. And let's do Alabama. Let's do California. Let's do Nebraska. Click save. And because I added that board in the middle, it's going to then recompute all the boards below it. Great. We don't have an indication of, which stores per state had a certain number of transactions. We just have them by chains. So maybe we'll add a chart showing transactions by state. I'm going to insert board, and I'm just going to search for the chart board here. On the x-axis, again, I want time by month. We're going to just do a row count, but we're going to segment by store region. Compute and save. Okay, great. As expected, California has the most stores, so it's got the most transactions. We can go through the exercise of formatting this, but I'm not going to at this point. It's really just a gut check of, how many stores are there in each state. Let's return to the overview. if we return to the overview, we see a real looking path now. It's no longer empty. We have a bunch of different boards here. And this is starting to look a bit more like a path, right? You know, you have a starting point, you have steps through the analysis, and you've got an ending point. At this point, let's create a new path so that we can add in more data to understand what brands are being purchased the most, what products are being purchased the most. And to do that, we're going to create a new path. And now we have a couple different options that we didn't have before. One is datasets in this analysis. This is a convenience menu so that you don't have to go search for datasets when you've already used them here. The idea being, you know, if you've used it once recently, you're likely to use it again. That's pretty handy. We have the select dataset, which we had before, but we have this other one, paths in this analysis. And I'm going to choose this one. And so this is a little different. Instead of starting this path from a dataset, we're starting it from the tail of another path that is the performance by state path. So if we go back into that other one, we always have this result board at the very bottom, which is just representing the output of the data. And we can start new paths from that output, which we're doing here. Okay, let's show data just to show that it was what we're looking for. And you notice this is not the 201,000 rows, it's the 37,000 rows of just California, Nebraska, and Alabama that we've already filtered to. Data looks good here. Going to close that. And what I'd like to do is join in some additional data. So I'm going to click join. I'm going to choose my data set. This is not in the analysis yet. Object data sources. And what I want is basket. Basket in this ontology is simply the details of a transaction. So in the transactions data set, every row is one purchase. In the baskets data set, every row is one product in that grocery bag. You know, if you bought chips and apples, it's got, you know, how many pounds of apples, what was the total price, or how many bags of chips, and what was the total price of all those bags of chips summed up together. Okay, we're going to pick our columns here. We don't need basket ID. Product subtotal, yeah, that could be good. And SKU is important because we'll be joining in product data, and quantity is also important. And the price of individual items is good too. Okay, and we're going to match on transaction ID, click save. And again, I'm going to calculate a summary, making sure this looks how I'm expecting, and it is bigger, which is good because for every one transaction, there are multiple items in that basket, typically. And I'm going to do one more join because I want to get product data. Choose a data set, object data sources, and grocery products. And this is a data set of various different grocery products. I'm going to click on the column here. You see we've got department, what category is it, does it belong to, what's the subcategory, what's the name of the product, what's the brand, so on and so forth. And the ones I want are department, category, subcategory, name, brand. We're going to match on SKU. And again, I'm going to calculate the summary here. This should be exactly the same, that is. Great. Now, mentally, I've kind of lost track of what columns are in this big data set now. So I could show the table. That's helpful. I can scroll through it. It's useful to get an intuition for what the data looks like. But there's another way I could get a sense of what columns are available to me, which is this show column panel here on the right. And you have a handy little filter bar here. So you can search for cat, gives me category and subcategory. For each of these, you can uncollapse one, such as store name, and Contour will calculate some column statistics here. It gives me a histogram of what values are here, you know, how many are null, how many are unique, none are null, and since they're repetitions, none are unique. This is a really handy way of understanding at a glance what columns are available to you and what are their general characteristics. Okay, great. I think now I would like to understand on a per store basis what are the, which departments are, how much are each department selling? Which departments are selling the most? Which departments are selling the least? I think a pivot table would be good. I don't know where that is, so I'm just going to click search and then type pivot table. For rows, I want store ID. For columns, I want department. And for the aggregate, I want to sum Not the total, because again, we've got multiple rows per transaction now. That would give me way too much. We want the product subtotal, because each row now corresponds to one product in a grocery basket. And I would like grand totals shown. So compute. Okay, good. This looks pretty good. We have a grand total. We've got a stored ID. We have each category. Let's reformat the columns into US dollars. That formatted that one column. That would be a pain in the butt if we had to do that for every single column. Thankfully, there's a format cells option right here, and we're going to go to US dollars for all the different columns. This could still use some improvement, though. It's looking pretty good, but store ID doesn't tell me much unless I've memorized all those individual store IDs. Let's add a few more items to the rows here. I'm going to add store region, store city, and the store name. Recompute pivot table. Great. This is much more readable, much more useful. I'm going to go all the way over to the right, and this is a little small because it's such a big table, so I'm going to enter full screen mode just to get a better view. So I have to scroll a little bit less, and I'm going to sort grand total descending and see which stores come out on top. Okay, so of the California, Nebraska, and Alabama stores, it looks like this Fresh Harvest Market in San Jose has sold the most. If we want to check out beverages, then it looks like the Fresh Harvest Market in Fullerton has sold the most. We have our pivot table here. Before we move on in the analysis, I wanted to take a slight detour and show you one thing that you can do with some boards that can both display data and transform data. The pivot table is one such board. So far in this configuration pane, we've just been figuring out how we want to show the data here. And if we open our table again, we can see that the data is still in the same format it was above. We still have total and the timestamp and the IDs and so on and so forth. Nothing about the structure of the data has changed. However, if we click Switch to Pivoted Data, then what this board does is it takes this pivot table we created and causes all data downstream of that to take on that structure. So as we see this table updating here, now store ID is a column, store region is still a column, store city is still a column, but now alcohol is a column, bakery and bread is a column, baking is a column, frozen is a column, and so on and so forth. This matters if you wanted to save a data, you save this as a data set, or just really do any other analysis with this downstream of it. I don't need this pivoted for what I want to do here, so I'm going to exit that out. This table on the right is going to revert to what it was before, and we can continue on our analysis. I like this pivot table, but I would also like the ability to say, for a given time range, show me this data. And to do that, I'm going to add a filter above here. Now, when you have the option of filtering before joining data, you should take that option because it's going to be less computationally intensive. If you've got fewer rows to join against, it's just going to take less resources to do the join. So I could add a filter here to say between some start time and some end time, but I'm going to add it up here before I join in this other data. So I'm going to add the filter, and the column is going to be the timestamp. On or after, no, I want between, and let's just say, go back a couple months, between March 2nd and June 3rd, that seems fine. Click Save. Everything below this will recompute. And that looks pretty good. The dollars are much lower than they were before. Passes my gut check. Okay, at this point, let's go back to the overview, check out both of our boards. This is pretty good. We have our analysis, we have our data visualizations. This isn't the greatest way of presenting it to someone else, especially if they don't know Contour. It would be nice if we could add this to some type of dashboard. And we can do that. let's go back into our first path here. Actually, before that, let's go back and rename this path. So instead of performance by state, we'll say sales by department for selected states. Okay, now let's add some stuff to a dashboard. We're going to go in here, and no doubt you've noticed these add to dashboard buttons on the boards that Contour is displaying data in. They're not on the boards where Contour transforms data, unless it's one where you can do both, like the pivot table board. We're going to click Add to Dashboard for that one. Actually, whoops, that's not one that I wanted. I'm going to remove that from my dashboard. I'm going to close that. I'm going to add that to the dashboard. And I'm going to add that to the dashboard. And in the other path, I'm going to add this pivot table to the dashboard. Okay. What we've got right here is not the dashboard. It's this overview of what boards are in the dashboard. Let's give our dashboard a name. We'll call it Store Performance by State. And then there are two ways we can access it. We can open the dashboard right here, or we can click this big blue button up there. Now we are opening the dashboard, and it's fine. It's got the data we want in here, but it's maybe in a little bit of a rough shape. It's not really in the order I would prefer it to be in, and it's not really in the format. So first things first, let's get these two charts side by side. And to do that, I'm going to get this handle here and drag it, and wherever the blue line is where this is going to go. So now we've got two columns, total spent over time and purchases over time. This pivot table doesn't have a title. Let's fix that. So we'll say purchase, we'll call it totals by store per department, or better yet, department totals by store. And again, we're only looking at those California, Alabama, and Nebraska stores. It would be nice to be able to filter that on this dashboard. So let's go back and figure out how to do that. I'm going to click back to analysis to exit the dashboard and return to the path overview here. And this is where we want to introduce parameters. Parameters are, if you've done any coding, they're like variables. If you've done work in Excel, it's like when you refer to something as A4 instead of whatever's in A4. Maybe the value 5 is in cell A4, but you're going to refer to it as A4 instead of 5. And so here we're going to refer to a parameter name instead of the actual value. Instead of Alabama, Nebraska, and California, we're going to refer to a parameter that I'm going to call state. It's got a name, it's got a display name. What type is it? Well, it's a string, it's not a number, it's not a date. This refers to the type that the column is, and the store region is a string. Default value, we don't need anything here because I want by default all the states to be available, but if you wanted to, you could say, hey, by default, let's add Vermont to the filter so that all the stores are, all the data is filtered just to Vermont. The really useful thing here, though, is suggest values from linked column. So in this dropdown, I'm going to click a data set in this analysis, and then I'm going to pick a column here, which is in stores, we want store region. So now, if we were to add a default value, now we have all these suggestions here. This is really good because that will also work in the dashboard view. It's going to have a nice handy drop-down of all the different states your users or whoever's consuming this dashboard of yours doesn't need to know beforehand what values they can type in there. Okay, I'm going to click Create, and now that we have this parameter, we need to add it into our analysis. I'm going to go into Performance by State, and where we have this filter here, I'm going to click on the gear to get back into edit mode. Let's get rid of these values. And instead of typing something in, I'm going to select the state parameter and click Save. Okay, now this is going to recompute because now we have all the states. Let's click on parameters, enter value. We'll pick Connecticut, hit apply, and now it recomputes it just for Connecticut. And that is way more convenient than going into that filter board every single time you want to test out a different value. I would like to edit this parameter though, because right now we are allowing just a single value to be selected, but I think it'd be good if we could let people pick multiple states. So I'll select that, hit save, and our parameter will let us enter multiple states like Texas and Virginia. Hit apply, that'll update the analysis. Let's X out of that and add some more parameters. I think another good candidate for parameterization is this time range here. So I'm going to create a parameter, start date. The type is not string, it is a date. And for a default value, let's, I don't know, we'll do January of 2022, January 1st, 2022. Sounds good to me. Create. I also want an end date. And now I'm going to edit this filter board. And instead of picking a date on the calendar, I'm going to hit parameter, start date, parameter, end date, save. And everything will recompute for the default values in the date parameters. Let's close this and return to the dashboard and take a look at what it is now. Okay, I'm going to open this parameters field here, and it looks like we still have Texas and Virginia selected for the states. We can X out of them, and things will recompute. Now, however, got to click apply, and things will recompute now. Let's go into full screen mode to make it look a little nicer. Now your consumers of this dashboard have these filters here that they can access, which is pretty nice. So it's a bit more of a self-serve experience. I could go, back in time, 2021, January 1st, apply, and it's going to update the data. Pretty typical for a dashboard that you would give someone. One thing to add while we're here is that dashboards can have multiple tabs. This is a very simple one. We don't need multiple tabs, but you can add them and give them different names if you had a lot of charts or a lot of visualizations that you wanted to include. I'm going to exit full screen, go back to the analysis now. Since we made this dashboard, we definitely want to be able to share it. And you can click this share button up here, and that will share your dashboard and analysis with whoever has permissions to see it. Another handy thing you can do is if you have a particular parameter configuration you care about, let's add Arizona here, and we have our dates already set. We can hit apply. Then we can click this link right here, which copies a link to our clipboard so that when we give it to someone, send them an email or send it over instant message, they can open it and get this view that we're seeing right now. So it looks like Arizona only has Fresh Harvest Market. They only have 3 stores. If I open a new tab and paste that, then what we get is the same view of the dashboard with Arizona pre-filled in the parameter. Now, if this person wanted to go start editing things, they're not going to overwrite the original dashboard. They're just editing the view that they see at the moment. The last thing to say about dashboards and the analysis is editing mode versus viewing mode. So right now we're in editing mode, and we were in editing mode in the dashboard as well. You can also toggle to viewing mode, and this is what someone will see if they have the ability, if they have permissions to see your analysis but not change it. This will be a darker color up here, and they'll be able to look at these paths, but they can't configure anything. They don't have that gear to edit the table. They can't mess anything up. Same thing for the dashboard. Right now we're in viewing mode. I can see the dashboard, but I can't edit anything. That said, I still can use these parameters because, again, that's not changing anything. That's just changing my view of the data. This is really handy for distributing your dashboard, giving people view access but not edit access. One question we haven't answered yet is what happens when new data comes in the pipeline? presumably people are still making purchases at the grocery store, so there's going to be new transactions, and maybe we're going to open up new stores, so there'll be new stores. Well, Contour gives you two ways of handling this. One is when there's new data available, you have the ability to update the data right here. You could also snooze it if you want. You know, if you're going to present this data and you've got a big meeting coming up and you're like, I don't need the latest data. I want everything to remain the same. You can snooze the update, or you can click update and it will recompute the path. That's what I'm going to do here. And okay, that looks pretty good. Another thing you could do, though, is go to settings, and this is settings just for this analysis, and toggle refresh analysis data on open. So that means whenever anyone opens the dashboard or the analysis, it will recompute things with the latest data. This is really handy if you're going to use this to make an analytical product that's used by a lot of people, and you always want them to have the latest data. So whenever someone opens the analysis, it's going to check, hey, you know, have all these boards been using the latest data? If not, let me refresh them. So that wraps our intro to Contour lesson. There's a lot more you can do with this software. You can do some very large-scale analysis and some very sophisticated analysis, but this should be enough to get you started. If you have any other questions, do let me know, and I'll see if I can address them in a future video.